Hello and welcome to MidWEEK. My name is Mechelle Wingle, and my soul's purpose is to move the planet forward, healing myself and others emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And today I want to begin with a story, and it's a personal story. And this was one of those moments that change us forever, that move us into a new direction and kind of change our trajectory of our lives. And keep watching because I want to share with you, the point is I want to share with you the secret to living with powerful intention. And spoiler alert, the secret to intention is tension. So a few years ago, I was feeling hopeless. My heart felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My body ached and my brain hurt all the time. I remember I was working in the yard one day and I had to sit down. I was so exhausted and tired. And there were some stairs in our backyard, some cement stairs that kind of went down to a basement room. And at the top of the stairs, I sat down and I propped myself up with my hands behind my back and looked longingly in the sky, hoping that the sun would be able to burn up all the trouble that I was feeling, all that pain and anguish. However, I would describe my emotion of that time as numb. I summoned my right hand and I began to trace the word help next to me on the stair, and it was the only communication I could utter. I imagined I was writing that word in the sky in big letters or on the beach, like in the movie, and I all of a sudden in that moment, in a split second, I understood that for me, the letters HELP was me asking for help. And for the person receiving the message, whoever that was, the same exact HELP was beckoning them to answer. So the question and the answer existed in the exact same place, in the exact same HELP. And it would be up to each individual to ask themselves which one that meant for them, whether it was a call for help or a call to help. To or for. And one cannot get to 4 without passing through 2. So the lesson number 1 I learned was I was where I was meant to be. And it was okay to be asking for help. And that I had offered help in the past and I was willing to help again if needed. But that 2 and 4, it was okay for me to be in that place. And I'm not saying you must have to give in order to receive. It's just that giving and receiving were not as opposite as I may have thought. They were existing at the same place. Which brings me to lesson 2, and maybe the spectrum of opposites was where I could find my help. And so I have been on a journey of understanding this HELP, this help hypothesis ever since. And from this moment on, I began to see things in spectrum. That's the best way I can describe it. And it's if things were in black and white before, and suddenly the 2 colors pulled apart, and the whole spectrum of light poured forth. And not only did this spectrum consist of color, or what really is waves of light at certain frequencies, but there was light that I couldn't see. And light I had to believe in and trust because I couldn't see it. And that was okay. And the metaphors kept coming, and yet I think only a few seconds passed by in reality. But it was a pivotal moment in my life. And the way it began to shift me was with little ordinary things and bigger and more important things. All sorts of things started to shift for me. I prided myself on knowing myself. I do still. I knew what I didn't like. I knew what I liked, and I wasn't afraid to voice my knowing. But all of a sudden, what I liked and didn't like was put in spectrum form. I realized there were very, very few things that would sit on either extreme end of black and white. And it was more than a series of gray, because the whole light spectrum sat between these two extremes. Thousands of thoughts, beliefs, expectations, emotions, experiences, etc. have a way of climbing on this spectrum of light, metaphorically. You may find that I say one thing as I'm speaking every week or with you in person, and then at another point I might say the opposite, and I actually mean both things. And it's because of this spectrum. This is why. Because even though the entire spectrum of light sits between the absorption of all light and the reflection of all light, they exist on the same spectrum. They are in the same place. They are at one. This new perspective brought new meaning to the word atonement and my personal atonement, at one-ment. It's shifted things for me. And you get to work those words out for yourself, what those mean. But how is it powerful? How was this moving into spectrum thinking powerful? How is this the secret for living with intention? Here is how. In life, we are presented with choices. I believe learning to navigate choice is one of the lessons we are here to learn. One of the purposes for us being on this planet. With choice, there are positive consequences and negative consequences, a spectrum, a place of tension between both sides of an issue. And before, I may have only paid attention to the extreme ends of the spectrum. So right and wrong, good and bad. But now I see a whole lot more. And like I say, it's more than just the grays. The place I was in, hurt, ache, pain, was also the place I could find peace, pleasure, and love. And I knew it. It didn't make sense at the time, but I knew that was truth. And I hoped it was truth. The extremes were important. They were important, but they were never meant to be the destination like I may have thought. They were there to define the space where I could grow. They were the anchors to the experience. For example, a funny example, I could choose to speed while driving. A positive consequence would be I would get there faster, and a negative consequence I could get a ticket or crash. But there are a whole bunch of scenarios in between. I could just speed a little and get there just a little faster. I could go too slow. The choice to speed or not speed could be a lifelong debate that never gets settled because there's so many choices. And there's never one specific answer I would adhere to at all the time. And that's the reality of driving. I move along the spectrum every time I drive. I have to use agency more than once. I have to choose again and again each time. And I learn each time, even when the consequences are bad, and that realizing that agency wasn't just one choice, but it was many choices. Another example, I used to say that if I was presented with a choice between a lovely caramel apple and a rotten apple, there would really be no choice. The choice doesn't exist there. I don't know if anybody that would choose, just if they had those two choices, to eat a rotten apple over an unblemished caramel apple. Just because there were two choices, we really didn't get the ability to choose. One is terrible and one is great. Our choices it limits our choices. and everybody would just choose the same, and we'd choose that again. But again, if we were only presented with that over and over again, that caramel apple would begin to not taste good. But when we string that along on a spectrum with different amounts of caramel and stages of ripeness, then the choice opens up, and that's agency. That's where we choose along that spectrum. When new rules or regulations or policies arise, I see it as a spectrum. Following them with exactness on one end and completely ignoring them on the other end. That creates the spectrum. And the place I choose is the tension point. That those ends, we need those ends, or else we don't have that tension point. So each of the ends are vital. And it is only within this beautiful spectrum that agency exists, that we really use our agency, where my unique path lights up and where I am at one. Below in the comments or below, I'm going to put a link to a music video that I really would like you to watch. And it's about light. And I honor you and hope that you will live in the light and know that light is a spectrum, and that some light we cannot see, some light we have to trust, some light we have to create ourselves. So I will see you next time. Have a good week, and Happy New Year 2021.